In this video, we're going to walk through the installation procedure for the Vagabond Motorsports Fender Eliminator on the 2022 and newer Yamaha R7.
Now before we get into the install process, let's quickly review some of the key details of the Vagabond kit for the R7. It's a two-piece kit, proudly made here in the United States. The main structural components are both CNC laser cut and CNC formed from 1/8 inch thick aluminum. They both are UV resistant, satin black powder coated, so very durable, kind of OEM appearance. The frame adapter has pressed in threaded inserts so that there are fewer pieces of loose hardware you got to deal with. And it's a totally plug and play kit, which is to say hand tools only for installation, no permanent modifications required to the motorcycle from either a wiring or kind of like the plastics or the structural component standpoint. It is designed to reuse the OEM lights, so the license plate light and the turn signal flanges mimic the factory Fender, so your kind of DOT certified lights are going to cross right over into the Fender Eliminator install. And it includes a comprehensive hardware kit, which includes single zip tie, a pair of custom laser cut plastic spacers for the turn signal installation, a rubber grommet for pass-through of the wiring through the Fender Eliminator to minimize wire chafing, and then a handful of nuts and bolts. Specifically, there's 4 stainless steel socket cap screws and lock washers, a pair of rubber bumpers for the license plate flange, a pair of stainless steel fender washers for the license plate light installation, and a single plastic washer to help trim out one of the underside plastic panels to finish the installation. As for tools needed for this installation, it's a pretty simple set of hand tools. You don't have to use a power driver like I'll be using for this installation, but you can. We do need a pair of flush cutters or dikes to cut zip ties, a Phillips head screwdriver, 8 and 10 millimeter hex sockets with a ratchet, and a 4 and a 5 millimeter Allen key.
We're going to start the install by removing the passenger seat with the key. Next, we're going to remove this trim panel by popping the center. I just used the tip of the 4mm Allen key. Pop these 2 plastic rivets out. You push the center until they click, and then you can pull them out. And then just kind of pop out this center panel. Set it aside. Then we're going to remove the rider seat, and there's a pair very closely spaced together of 5mm Allen head bolts. Keep a finger on them when you remove them so you don't drop them into the depths of the bike. You can pop the rear seat up, slide it back, pull it to the side. While we're still up top, we're going to take all the bolts for the side panels off. You're going to start with this little central trim panel. It's a 4mm Allen head. Remove that plastic, it's kind of like a more cutting screw type thread, and slide that panel backwards to release it. Now up top, there's going to be these 4 kind of larger headed 4mm head screws and this little guy, this also 4mm in between. So remove that. These 4 bolts, and these do have spacers in them. You can either grab with the kind of shank of the bolt, scoop them out. Obviously all this is going to get reused, so set it aside for reinstallation later. Now there's a pair of kind of black oxide 10mm hex head bolts. Those are next. Those have integrated spacers, so no loose spacers. And the last thing up top are going to be 4 more of these plastic push head rivets. So pop them. There's 2 here and 2 right at like the color change on this blue bike. Now we got to go under the kind of tail section of the motorcycle, and we'll start with just a whole bunch of plastic rivet removal. So start with these 5 that are in this central trim panel, and the panel will actually come off. So once you've got those, grab that whole central panel and set that to the side. Now also for each side panel, there's a rivet at kind of the front, again where the color changes, and then one right under the tail light. And those pop the center. Let's pull those out. At this point, we're going to take the side panels off the motorcycle. You're going to start with the right side or the brake side, just because it's up top. You can see You're going to pull these off kind of like at an angle. There's a small overlap here with the pin boss. That you need to kind of pop up. Then this whole side panel is going to kind of move out. And that's all you need. So you kind of see how it kind of comes off like this because there's that kind of barbed boss going into a grommet over here. And the left side is the same. That's just going to come off. Rotate up. And once the side panels are off, you can take your factory toolkit, set that aside. Now we're going to take the ECU, so this is the bike's computer, and you can see it's just held on, it's in like a big rubber boot, and it's on these two posts. So we're actually just going to lift the whole ECU up. You'll kind of feel it pop off its two little posts, and you don't need to disconnect anything, just kind of rotate it gently out of the way. So next we're going to do the electrical connectors for the turn signals and the license plate light. It's going to be this white 2-pin, black 2-pin, and the gray 2-pin. The black and white ones you're going to push until you hear a click, and then it should separate. Okay. And then the gray 2-pin, I actually find a little easier if you use your fingernail just to pull up on the release tab, and it'll come out. So once your wiring is disconnected, you can see they all pass through like a little molded gap in the under tray. So once you get the wiring out of there, you're gonna have to cut that white zip tie, and it's maybe most easily accessible from the bottom. So don't worry about cutting any wiring, and we'll give you a new zip tie to redo that. And the last bit of wiring is this in black. It's kind of like a clamshell clip, so it has two pairs of kind of serrated teeth, and you'll just need to pop one side off at a time so you can approach it from both sides. And once that's opened up, there we go. Now all the wiring, and that includes the wiring. We're clamping also the tail light in that loom, and we'll make sure we put it back in there when we're done. All right, now we can take the rear fender off the motorcycle, and there's 4. I've already got the 2 on this side off. 8mm hex head bolts, and they have a little bit of thread locker on them, and just be careful. We're going to reuse these bolts too, so you're taking your last one out. Make sure you hold the fender with one hand so it doesn't just fall, and then you can take your other hand and kind of help guide out the cables. So once the factory fender's off the motorcycle, let's break it apart and take the lights out of it. Start with your license plate. Every dealer is going to be a little bit different in terms of hardware they use. This one's Phillips head screws. You'll reuse that to mount your license plate. Next we're going to do these 4mm head Allen keys. And you got to be really careful with these because they are very covered in thread locker. So if you use like a ball end, be very careful because they're button heads, so they can strip the head out. So once those are out, there's going to be a whole bunch of little loose things that kind of fall apart. That's okay. So what we care about are going to be the lights out of this thing, and so we'll start with the turn signals, and you can see there's Yamaha have these little like rubber ears that hold onto this like insert. So once you get that white insert out, you can just pull, kind of grab like by the lens side or the clear side and kind of pop it out that way and get the light out of it. And it's in the instructions, but the connector with the white connector is right and the one with the black is the left. And while we're on turn signals, before we get to the license plate light, quick note is that Yamaha sends the bike from the factory with this extra like inch of rubber, and it does make the turn signal generally kind of wobbly, and so you can take it off entirely, which is our recommendation, and it will give you a little bit better appearance. So this is how same exact interface. So we are going to use that little black plastic clip. So make sure you don't do anything with that, but you can yank these extensions off, and you don't end up using these white inserts. So set your turn signals to the side, and then there'll be another pair of 4mm Allen keys or Allen head bolts. And that will take the turn signal, or sorry, the license plate light out. You're going to reuse that. And all this hardware we're going to reuse, including those kind of aluminum shoulder spacers. And then last, we are going to take the rubber grommets out of the factory fender for the license plate light. Those are going to be reused. Now we can begin reassembly of these lights into the Fender Eliminator body. We'll start with the turn signals, and remember the white connector is the right side, so looking at the back motorcycle from the rear, this will be the right side. Before we install them, we supply 2 laser cut plastic spacers. They will have kind of a protective paper on them you can peel off. Start by threading them over the electrical connector through that kind of captive clip, and then we want to add this spacer to this gap, this kind of channel in the rubber boot of the turn signal, and that's just going to help take up some space such that we like thicken the flange here, and that's going to keep them from being super wobbly. Now you can tell the turn signals have this kind of split on the large side, so we're going to use that to our advantage. And this is, you should be careful here, but there's pretty strong spacers. People have broken them. Start with the narrow end, kind of hook it on, and then just push in the spacer. And so we'll do that on both sides really quick. And if you happen to snap a spacer here, just let us know and we'll ship you out some more. But yeah, start on the kind of narrow side of the teardrop and use your thumb to kind of push them on. So at that point, what you can do is thread the connector and that plastic clip through the teardrop shape, and it's pretty much exactly the same process on the Fender Eliminator as it was with that spacer. So the spacer is going to be on the outside. Start with the narrow end of that kind of teardrop shape and just kind of work your way in, letting that split collapse and get itself in there, and then just install that black plastic clip. That's going to go into the 2 kind of tabs, or the kind of rectangular holes in those ears, and that's one side done. So we'll go do the other side. Once you've got your turn signals in, we're going to move on to the license plate light. The license plate light hardware is all reusing the factory hardware. So there's 2 bolts, 2 aluminum shoulder bushings, and 2 grommets. We'll start with the grommets and install them in the round holes, and I kind of the pair of holes on the back surface of the Fender Eliminator body. Just kind of shove them in, and then helps to flip it over and kind of flip up the end to get it sitting nice.
Once you got the grommets into the fender eliminator body, we're going to go ahead and install the aluminum. These are the factory pieces, aluminum strollers, bushings, but they're going to be aluminum face out, and that's opposite of how they came into or came out of the factory fender. And that just helps fit and finish. And when you go to connect the two, you reuse your 4mm button heads, but you're actually going to use a pair of these stainless steel fender washers, and that's just going to help since we're swapping what side that aluminum bushing goes on, it's going to help not crush that rubber bushing. So get those, and you can over tighten those, so there should be a small gap left over, and that's going to let this light have a little bit of compliance. So we'll tune out some of the vibration there. Next, we're going to put the connectors through that central hole, the largest hole. Just pop those through one at a time. Try not to make a giant tangle like that. Start with the two big connectors because they need the most space. And at this point, you do kind of want to get your cables looking about how you want them to come through from like a appearance standpoint. So to trim out this fender eliminator body, we are going to install a grommet in this hole to prevent kind of wire chafing. And it's one of the more challenging bits of the installation process. You're going to stretch this rubber grommet over these larger turn signal connectors, and some people actually do kind of open them up. I find it's much easier to kind of start a corner and then let the grommet roll over itself. Over that connector, the grommet will be fine, so no worries about that. We do the next one. There we go. And the license plate light is a breeze compared to those. Push that through. So once you've got all three looms through, I find it's a little easier to get set up while you still have some. Looks like I've got a little bit of reorganizing to do here. There we go. So they'll kind of going into the fender eliminator how I want it, and then you start pushing that grommet into the groove, and looks good up here. Check on the bottom to make sure it also looks good. And you do want to check that you have unobstructed access to those 4 holes, because that's where the 2 parts of the fender eliminator are going to connect. Now once this is all done, the last bit is going to be to take the 2 rubber bumpers as supplied in the kit and install them into the license plate flange, and that's just going to keep the license plate from rattling or buzzing or cracking. Install those, and then this part is ready to go onto the motorcycle. So before we can get that fender eliminator onto the motorcycle, we're going to take the other piece that we supply, the frame adapter, and it's going to go directly to the subframe. And so we're going to reuse the factory 8mm head bolts. There are some slots on this mount so that it gives a little bit of adjustment and doesn't over constrain the manufacturing too much. So start all the bolts by hand. And then tighten them up. And realistically, you can see there's still a little bit of play, so by eye should be totally sufficient. Tighten it up. And then we'll follow it up with the fender eliminator body. Now we can actually install the fender eliminator body onto the motorcycle. Because there's a lot going on at one time, what I'd recommend is take one of the 4 supplied bolts or socket head cap screws and the lock washer, and we'll use that just to essentially get a good start on it. So you can kind of keep a wrench on it, that helps. What we'll do is we'll feed up all the electrical connectors. And kind of grab them out of the way there. And all you got to do is start one
the 4, and then you can kind of let everything stay put while you install the other 4. And you can get the other 4 bolts started by hand, and then go ahead and take your 4mm and snug them all up. You'll feel the lock washer compress, and that's tight enough. And while you're down here, just make sure the wiring is what you want it to look like, because we're going to go and tighten it up at the top. All right, next we're going to tidy up all the wiring, and you're going to take the 3 looms that were on the Fender Eliminator, and the 4th is the existing loom for the tail light, and put that back through that little kind of alligator clamp, and then they all will go back through that little raceway in the plastic subframe tray. And the last bit is, you may recall we cut a zip tie. We're going to supply a zip tie in the kit to replace that one. So in the same little like bridge area that the factory white zip tie was here, I'll give you one to reinstall. Once it's sufficiently snug, use a pair of flush cutters to clean that up. And you're going to be left with a little bit of extra wiring, but we'll start by reconnecting all the cables that we disconnected for the factory Fender. And because we're going to put the computer back under, let's see, so let's just get all that tidied up. So once you got your wiring kind of packed down in that channel, there'll be a little bit left over, and I would make that into a service loop and kind of push it back towards the rear. And when you put your computer back, it will kind of get squeezed and secured. So once that's down, just don't put your diagnostic, whatever that connector is, under there as well. It stays up. Next we can start putting our side panels back on, and that kind of front tab is going to go underneath. Just kind of start lining everything up. There's going to be 2 kind of boxes that the Fender's going to want to clip into. One is going to be the taillight boss, and one's going to be kind of in the middle. So get those 2 panels on. And this one is gonna, there's a small overlapping bit and a tiny bit of tab there. Alright, once your panels are kind of into their rubber mount, you can start kind of reversing the installation process that got us here. So we'll do the 4 rivets and already reset those, but if you need to know how to do that, you just, when they come out of the bike, they'll look like that. You push them back to the center comes proud and push them to lock. Then we're going to have the 10mm head bolts, hex head, 10mm. Get everything tight, or hand tight, before we go and wrench tight everything. Next we'll go to the back side, and you'll have that, remember that one kind of sharper threaded, almost looks like a plastic thread cutting screw. That's going to go on the two panels, like the bridge between the two panels. And then you're going to have these 4mm, and each one of them have spacer in them. Let's get those guys installed. After everything's kind of snug or hand tight, go grab a proper wrench and tighten these completely. Especially little ones like this, no point in going super crazy with torque. Back to 10 mils. Okay. Next we're going to do this little trim panel. Remember that slides on, grabs, because right now the taillight's kind of jiggling a bit. So that needs to grab that back tooth, slide forward. Notice the taillight gets all nice and snug when you do that. Okay. Once you've got all the top bolts and rivets in on your side panels, we can put the rider seat back in, and 5mm Allen head screws, the factory screws. Get them started by hand. Send them in. Put the factory toolkit back in there. And then this little central trim panel that covers up the seat bolts. Kind of have to get these two little, it's going to slide forward. And then these two tabs kind of pop in. And then the two plastic rivets to finish it off. And obviously the last bit up top is the passenger seat. Yeah, on the underside of the motorcycle, we're going to start by putting the central trim panel back in. And there's a tooth on the middle of it that you start with, and kind of pop it just barely underneath the Fender Eliminator body. Start putting these rivets back in, and on the last one in the middle, there's a part of the factory fender that normally extends in there and grabs it, and we're not going to do that with the Fender Eliminator. And so we supply just a real small black plastic washer that goes under the head of the middle one. And all that does is allow it to sit nice and tight without being like really loose and jiggly. And so use that washer under just that middle one. And then each side panel has two more plastic rivets. One kind of towards the front, right by the color change part, and then one right under the tail light, right above the license plate light. And now when you do kind of have to fish in and let there's space for it. Once you've got everything buttoned up, go ahead and put your license plate light on. Do a quick systems check to make sure you've got license plate illumination and your turn signals left and right are functional. Double check your brake lights just to make sure everything is good post-install. Now with that, the installation of the Fender Eliminator is complete. Give you a couple kind of sweeping views to see how tight the fit and finish is to the body lines of the motorcycle. Our products can be found at www.vagabondmotorsports.com. Thank you.